In a crowded courtroom, silence shattered when two police officers slapped a black woman across the face. The audience gasped, horrified, as her dignity was stripped in front of the very system meant to protect her. But what happened next would leave everyone stunned. Just seconds later, as the whispers turned into chaos, this same woman rose, not in anger, but in authority. The courtroom froze when she walked straight toward the judge's bench. No one could believe their eyes. How could the victim of such humiliation possibly become the one in charge of delivering justice? Her name was Danielle Harris, a young black attorney who had spent her life fighting for fairness in a world that rarely gave it to her. She wasn't born into privilege. She grew up in a small neighborhood where her parents worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. From an early age, Danielle saw how often justice tilted away from her community. Neighbors arrested for minor infractions. Friends treated as suspects simply for the color of their skin. Those memories lit a fire inside her. She swore that one day she would stand where decisions were made, not just where punishments were handed down. Danielle worked relentlessly, studying late into the night, often skipping meals so she could afford books and tuition. Every rejection letter only pushed her harder. Finally, she made it into law school, one of only a handful of black women in her class. Her presence was questioned, her intelligence doubted, but she kept pushing. She graduated with honors, determined to prove that her voice could never be silenced. That path eventually led her into the courthouse where the shocking scene unfolded. But this wasn't just another trial. Danielle wasn't there as a spectator. She was part of the legal proceedings, standing firm in a system that had never welcomed her. The tension in that courtroom wasn't new. For years, she had felt the weight of disrespect, in whispers, in dismissive gestures, in the eyes of those who thought she didn't belong. What no one knew was that everything she endured was about to converge in one unforgettable moment, a moment that would turn the courtroom upside down. The trial began like any other, with voices echoing across the high-ceilinged courtroom. Danielle sat poised, her notes neatly organized, her arguments sharpened to perfection. She had fought tirelessly to represent a young black man wrongly accused of assaulting an officer, a charge that, if upheld, would destroy his future. Danielle knew the stakes. This wasn't just about one man's freedom. It was about whether truth could survive in a place where bias often spoke louder than evidence. From the very start, hostility was evident. The prosecutor smirked whenever Danielle rose to speak, dismissing her words before they even left her lips. The judge, though silent, allowed interruptions when she presented her points, but never when her white counterpart did the same. Jurors shifted uncomfortably, caught between the facts laid before them and the unspoken weight of prejudice pressing down on the room. Then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. Danielle submitted crucial evidence, proof that her client had been nowhere near the alleged crime scene. The prosecutor objected, his voice booming with indignation. The judge hesitated, and just as Danielle pressed forward, demanding fairness, two officers stepped forward, towering above her. Without warning, one of them shoved her shoulder, and the other struck her across the face. The sound cracked through the air like a whip. Gasps filled the chamber. A black woman, an attorney, standing in the heart of justice, struck by the very men sworn to uphold the law. Her client looked on in horror, his fate tied to the same system that had just humiliated his defender. Some spectators rose in protest, while others remained frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. Danielle's cheek stung, but her pride burned hotter. She had endured insults before. She had endured the quiet racism that slithered beneath polite words, but never had it been so blatant, so violent, so public. She stood there, trembling not with fear, but with rage contained only by her willpower. The officers sneered, daring her to fight back, knowing the system would shield them. Yet the courtroom was changing. The jury's eyes no longer darted away. The murmurs in the gallery swelled into outrage. Cameras flashed, capturing every second. For years, Danielle had fought battles in silence, but today the silence had shattered. The humiliation she endured was not hers alone. It belonged to every person who had ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, and accept injustice. Still, something deeper was stirring inside her. As she pressed her hand against the swelling on her face, she realized she had reached a point of no return. The law books, the carefully prepared statements, the endless fight to be heard, none of it mattered if she remained in the position they had forced her into. Beneath them, Danielle looked at the judge's bench, the highest seat in the room. For years she had dreamed of standing there. Now, battered but unbroken, she understood. The time to rise had come. The courtroom was in chaos. Some shouted for order, others called for justice. The judge, pale and shaken, pounded the gavel, but his voice was drowned out by the storm. The two officers stood tall, defiant, convinced they had silenced Danielle once and for all. But as the noise roared, something no one could have predicted began to unfold. Danielle did not back down. Slowly, with deliberate calm, she gathered her papers from the table and placed them into her briefcase. Every eye followed her movements. She did not look at the officers, nor at the prosecutor who smirked with smug satisfaction. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the judge's bench, the very symbol of authority, the seat where decisions that shaped lives were made. Then, in a move that stunned the entire room, Danielle began walking toward it. At first, whispers filled the air. Surely she wouldn't, surely she couldn't. But each step she took rang louder than the last, echoing with defiance and courage. The guards shifted uneasily, unsure whether to stop her. The judge stammered, his words fumbling as Danielle's presence overpowered his, and then she climbed the steps. Her heels clicked against the wood as she rose higher, her body trembling yet steady. She turned, and in one breathtaking moment, Danielle lowered herself into the judge's chair. The courtroom froze. There she sat. The black woman who had been slapped, disrespected, and nearly silenced, now occupying the highest seat in the room. The same officers who had struck her stood below, suddenly small in comparison. The murmurs turned into a stunned silence, broken only by the sound of Danielle's calm, steady breath. She did not raise her voice. She did not lash out. Instead, she sat tall, embodying every ounce of authority she had spent her life fighting to earn. Cameras continued to click, capturing the sight of a woman who refused to remain beneath a system that degraded her. In that moment, Danielle was no longer just a lawyer defending a client. She was the embodiment of every silenced voice demanding to be heard. The balance of power had shifted, and the courtroom knew it. The room held its breath. For a few eternal seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The woman who had been struck down moments earlier now commanded the highest seat of authority. Danielle didn't need a gavel, nor a robe. Her presence alone spoke volumes. She represented a truth too powerful to ignore, that justice is not given, it is seized, even when the world tries to strip it away. The judge finally rose, his authority crumbling in the weight of the moment. The officers who had slapped Danielle no longer looked untouchable. Their arrogance drained as whispers spread among the jurors, the gallery, and the reporters, furiously scribbling notes. The story had already escaped the courtroom walls. What they had done in the shadows for so long was now glaring in the light. Danielle stood from the judge's chair, but not in defeat. She stood as a symbol. Every eye watched her descend, not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to bow. She returned to her client's side, placing her hand on his shoulder with quiet reassurance. For him, for her community, for everyone who had ever felt the sting of injustice, she had sent a message. Dignity cannot be slapped away. In the days that followed, the images went viral. Across the country, people debated what had happened in that courtroom. Some called it an act of defiance. Others called it a turning point. But for those who had lived in the shadow of prejudice, it was a moment of recognition. It was proof that even in the most hostile places, courage can flip the script. Danielle's career would never be the same. She faced backlash, investigations, and attempts to discredit her. But none of that could erase the image of her seated at that bench, unshaken. It became larger than her, a reminder that justice is not a privilege, it is a right, and that true change comes when those oppressed refuse to stay silent. And so the question lingers, for every viewer, every listener, when the system tries to put you in your place, will you stay seated? Or will you rise and claim the seat of power yourself?